For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On a sweltering afternoon in July 1998, 16-year-old Jason Parker left his family's side at Brazil's iconic Christ the Redeemer statue to capture one final photograph. He never returned. Despite an extensive international search effort involving Brazilian police, American authorities, and hundreds of volunteers combing the dense Tijuca forest, Jason seemed to vanish into the tropical air high above Rio de Janeiro. For 20 years, the Parkers lived with the crushing weight of uncertainty, their summer vacation transformed into an endless nightmare. Then, in 2018, a routine environmental cleanup in a remote section of the forest uncovered evidence that would not only solve Jason's disappearance, but expose a sinister operation that had terrorized tourists for more than a decade. This is the complete investigation into what happened to Jason Parker, and how a single camera would finally reveal the dark truth behind Rio's most notorious tourist trap. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this content, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Now let's continue. On July 15, 1998, 16-year-old Jason Parker stood at the base of Christ the Redeemer, his camera trained on the sprawling cityscape of Rio de Janeiro below. The Miami teenager had begged his parents for months to include the iconic statue in their Brazilian vacation, driven by his growing passion for photography and fascination with South American culture. It would be the last place his family would ever see him. The morning had started like any other tourist excursion. The Parkers arrived early to beat the crowds, taking the cog train up Corcovado Mountain as the sun rose over Guanabara Bay. Jason's mother, Sarah, would later recall how her son's eyes lit up when the statue first came into view, his camera already clicking away at the magnificent Art Deco monument against the clear blue sky. For 2 hours, the family explored the viewing platforms, with Jason methodically documenting every angle of the statue and the panoramic views of Rio below. Security camera footage from that morning shows Jason in his distinctive red Miami heat cap, moving between viewing points with the practiced eye of an aspiring photographer. At 10:47 a.m., the cameras captured a crucial moment. A man in what appeared to be an official tour guide uniform approached Jason. The teenager was alone at the northeastern viewing point, adjusting his camera settings. The guide, later identified as Roberto Silva, engaged Jason in conversation, pointing toward a trail that led away from the main tourist area. Sarah Parker remembers checking her watch at 11:15 a.m., their agreed meeting time for the return trip down the mountain. When Jason didn't appear, the family wasn't immediately concerned. It wasn't unusual for the teenager to lose track of time while photographing. But as minutes stretched into an hour, panic began to set in. The initial search was chaotic. Tourist police combed the immediate area while the Parker family frantically showed Jason's photo to other visitors. Security footage revealed the last known images of Jason, following the supposed guide toward a maintenance trail, camera still in hand. He never emerged from that path. By nightfall, the Brazilian military police had established a command center at the base of Corcovado. Captain Ana Santos, who would become deeply invested in the case, coordinated the first crucial hours of the search. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging scanned the dense Tijuca forest below, while ground teams with dogs worked their way through the undergrowth. The following days brought an unprecedented search effort. American embassy officials arrived to assist the family, and local media carried Jason's photo on every channel. The Parker family remained in Rio, holding daily press conferences in their hotel lobby, their voices growing more desperate with each passing day. Jason's disappearance sparked immediate changes in tourism security around Christ the Redeemer. Officials implemented stricter identification requirements for tour guides and increased police presence around the trails. But for the Parkers, these measures came too late. The last photo found on Jason's backup camera, turned over to police by his parents, showed the statue's outstretched arms against gathering clouds. It was time-stamped 10:43 a.m., just minutes before he encountered Silva. The image would become iconic in Brazilian media, symbolizing both the promise and peril that could await tourists in Rio's magnificent landscapes. As the first week drew to a close, hope began to fade. The Parkers had distributed over 5,000 flyers throughout Rio, their son's smiling face becoming familiar to millions of Brazilians. But the dense forest held its secrets, and the man in the guide's uniform had vanished as completely as Jason himself. What no one knew then was that Jason's disappearance was not a random act of violence or a tragic accident. It was the carefully orchestrated work of a criminal enterprise that had operated undetected for years, using Rio's most famous landmark as a hunting ground. The truth would take 20 years to emerge, hidden in the same forests that had swallowed a 16-year-old boy with a camera and dreams of capturing the world through his lens. The initial investigation into Jason Parker's disappearance revealed the devastating complexity of conducting an international missing persons case in Rio de Janeiro's vast urban landscape. Captain Ana Santos of the military police arrived at Christ the Redeemer within hours of the first report, immediately recognizing the gravity of the situation. The security footage became the investigation's focal point. Grainy images showed Jason following the unidentified guide down a maintenance path, but the camera's limited range meant the pair disappeared from view within seconds. Forensic analysts spent days enhancing the guide's image, but the man's face remained frustratingly unclear, partially obscured by a baseball cap and the camera's low resolution. Captain Santos assembled a team of 30 officers to interview every vendor, maintenance worker, and registered tour guide who had been present that day. The witnesses' accounts painted a troubling picture. Several tourists remembered seeing the man in the guide's uniform, but none had hired him officially. A souvenir seller recalled the guide speaking perfect English with an American accent, unusual for local operators. The language barrier complicated matters significantly. American embassy officials worked alongside Brazilian police, but crucial details often got lost in translation. The DEA's Brazil liaison, Agent Michael Torres, joined the investigation when initial evidence suggested possible connections to drug trafficking in the area. Local residents had reported suspicious activity in the forest trails, but previous investigations had yielded nothing concrete. Search teams faced treacherous conditions in the Tijuca forest. The dense vegetation and steep terrain made it impossible to maintain straight search patterns, and afternoon rains frequently washed away potential evidence. Dog units tracked Jason sent to a point nearly 2 kilometers into the forest before losing it completely. 5 days into the search, investigators discovered the first significant lead. A crumpled tourist map was found along the maintenance trail, bearing Jason's fingerprints. The map had markings indicating a route that didn't appear on official guides, leading investigators to suspect the fake guide had used it to lure Jason away from crowded areas. Captain Santos ordered surveillance of all registered tour companies in Rio, cross-checking employee records against the security footage. The investigation revealed an alarming pattern. Several tourists had reported similar encounters with unofficial guides at major attractions, though none had ended in disappearance. The reports had been filed separately and never connected until Jason's case forced a broader review. The Parker family's presence added both urgency and complexity to the investigation. Their daily calls to American media outlets brought international attention, but also created diplomatic pressure that sometimes hindered local police work. Captain Santos found herself balancing the family's desperate need for information against the methodical pace required for a thorough investigation. 2 weeks into the search, investigators interviewed a breakthrough witness. A hiking guide reported seeing a white van parked unusually far up the maintenance road on the morning of Jason's disappearance. The vehicle's description matched ones used by several legitimate tour companies, making it difficult to trace, but it provided the first solid evidence of a planned operation rather than a crime of opportunity. The initial investigation phase concluded with more questions than answers. The fake guide had vanished completely, leaving no trace in tourist authority records or criminal databases. Jason's camera, phone, and backpack were never found in the initial search areas. Captain Santos's final report for this phase indicated a probable kidnapping, but without a body or ransom demand, the case's direction remained unclear. As summer turned to fall, the active search was scaled back. The Parker family returned to Miami, leaving behind a case that would haunt Rio's law enforcement for decades. Captain Santos kept the file on her desk, reviewing it regularly, convinced that the answer lay somewhere in the forest that had swallowed a 16-year-old photographer and his dreams of capturing Brazil's beauty. What no one realized then was that the true horror of Jason's fate lay not in the immediate violence of his disappearance, but in the vast criminal enterprise it would eventually expose. The fake guide's careful selection of Jason was just one thread in a complex web of criminal activity that had turned Rio's natural wonders into hunting grounds for predators hiding behind friendly smiles and counterfeit credentials. In the years following Jason Parker's disappearance, the case that had once dominated Rio's headlines gradually faded into a cautionary tale. Every July 15th, Sarah and Robert Parker would return to Miami's St. Michael's Church, lighting a candle for their son and speaking to dwindling crowds of supporters and media. The story that had once captivated two nations became another cold case in a file drawer, though it never truly left the minds of those closest to the investigation. Captain Ana Santos kept her promise to the Parker family, dedicating a portion of each week to reviewing the evidence. She maintained a detailed timeline on her office wall, adding new theories and connections as other tourist-related crimes crossed her desk. But with each passing year, the leads grew colder and the witnesses' memories less reliable. The Parkers never gave up their search. They established a foundation in Jason's name, offering rewards for information and funding improved security measures at tourist sites throughout Brazil. Robert Parker, once a successful real estate agent, spent his savings traveling to Rio de Janeiro every 6 months, plastering the city with updated age progression photos of his son and meeting with local authorities. In 2003, 5 years after Jason's disappearance, a potential breakthrough emerged when a former tour guide claimed to recognize the man from the security footage. The lead sparked a brief flurry of activity, with Captain Santos assembling a task force to investigate. But like so many before it, this promising lead dissolved under scrutiny, leaving only disappointment in its wake. The case's impact on Rio's tourism industry proved lasting. Tour guide regulations were overhauled, requiring comprehensive background checks and standardized identification systems. The Christ the Redeemer site installed additional security cameras and implemented strict protocols for guided tour. Yet these changes offered little comfort to the Parkers, who knew they came too late for Jason. Local media marked the 10th anniversary of the disappearance with a documentary that raised new questions about similar cases in the region. 3 other tourists had vanished from Rio's attractions between 1995 and 1998, though none of the cases had been connected at the time. The program sparked a brief resurgence of interest, but without new evidence, investigators could only speculate about potential links. Sarah Parker channeled her grief into advocacy, becoming a prominent voice for families of missing Americans abroad. She testified before congressional committees, pushing for stronger international cooperation in missing persons cases. Her efforts led to improved protocols between U.S. and Brazilian law enforcement, though these institutional changes couldn't heal her personal wound. By 2013, 15 years after Jason vanished, the case file had grown thick with false leads and dead ends. Captain Santos, now nearing retirement, had trained a new generation of officers using Jason's case as a lesson in both the importance of rapid response and the frustration of unsolved mysteries. The security footage of Jason following the fake guide became a training tool, shown to every new officer as a reminder of how quickly a routine day could turn tragic. The Parkers' annual pilgrimages to St. Michael's Church grew smaller, though no less intense in their grief. Robert had aged beyond his years, his hair turned completely white, while Sarah found solace in counseling other families of missing children. They maintained Jason's room exactly as he had left it, his camera equipment still arranged on the desk, waiting for a return that seemed increasingly impossible. In Miami, Jason's high school class celebrated their 20th reunion in 2018. His former classmates maintained a scholarship in his name, awarded annually to a student pursuing photography. The recipient's works were displayed alongside Jason's last photos from Brazil, creating a poignant bridge between the artistic promise that was lost and the talent it continued to inspire. The case seemed destined to remain one of Rio's unsolved mysteries, a tragic footnote in the city's history. But fate had other plans. As the 20th anniversary of Jason's disappearance approached, a routine environmental cleanup operation in Tijuca Forest would uncover secrets that had lain hidden for 2 decades, finally bringing answers to the questions that had haunted 2 continents for a generation. In March 2018, as Rio de Janeiro prepared for its annual environmental cleanup initiative, no one expected the Tijuca Forest to finally surrender its long-held secret. A team of conservation workers, clearing illegal dumping sites deep within the forest's northern sector, made a discovery that would shatter 20 years of silence. The workers initially noticed unusual soil discoloration while removing accumulated debris from a steep ravine. What caught their attention was a metallic glint in the disturbed earth, the corroded remnants of a camera, its casing partially crushed but its memory card remarkably intact. Hours later, their routine cleanup transformed into a crime scene when one of the workers uncovered human remains. Dr. Patricia Lima arrived at the site as dusk approached, her forensic team carefully illuminating the area with portable lights. The scattered bones, she would later testify, told a story of violence. The remains lay near the foundations of what appeared to be an abandoned structure, its concrete pad still visible beneath years of forest growth. The discovery site bore the hallmarks of a sophisticated drug processing operation. Rusted chemical drums, their labels long since weathered away, littered the surrounding area. The facility's location, nearly 3 kilometers from the tourist trails, had kept it hidden from routine patrols. The dense canopy above had prevented aerial detection, while the steep terrain discouraged casual hikers from venturing near. As Dr. Lima's team methodically documented the scene, the significance of their find became clear. The camera's serial number matched the one Jason Parker had been carrying on that July morning in 1998. Beneath layers of soil and debris, investigators found scraps of clothing consistent with what Jason had been wearing when he disappeared. Fragments of a red Miami Heat cap, degraded remnants of denim, and a partially preserved tourist map of Rio. The forensic recovery took 5 days. Each bone, each piece of evidence required careful extraction and documentation. Dr. Lima worked meticulously, knowing that every detail could be crucial for the Parker family, who had waited 2 decades for answers. The remains showed signs of a violent end, multiple fractures consistent with blunt force trauma, suggesting Jason had not died peacefully. The camera proved to be the key that would unlock the case. Though severely damaged, forensic technology specialists managed to recover images from its memory card. The final photographs showed more than just tourist snapshots of Christ the Redeemer. In the last sequence of images, apparently taken in panic, Jason had captured crucial details of the drug operation and clear photos of the man who had led him to his death. The discovery sent shockwaves through Rio's law enforcement community. Captain Ana Santos, now nearing retirement, returned to active duty to oversee the new investigation. The site contained evidence linking it to numerous other missing persons cases, suggesting a pattern of criminal activity spanning more than a decade. DNA testing confirmed what the Parker family had both dreaded and needed to know. The remains were Jason's. Sarah and Robert Parker flew to Rio immediately upon notification, finally able to bring their son home after 20 years of uncertainty. Standing at the discovery site, Sarah Parker placed a single flower where her son had last held his camera, his final act one of documenting the truth that would eventually bring his killers to justice. The finding sparked a massive joint operation between Brazilian authorities and the DEA. The abandoned drug facility, investigators discovered, was part of a larger network of criminal operations that had used Rio's tourist attractions as hunting grounds. The site contained evidence of at least a dozen other victims, turning a single missing persons case into one of Brazil's largest criminal investigations. The forest had kept its secret for 2 decades, but now the truth emerged with devastating clarity. Jason Parker had not simply vanished on a tourist trail. He had stumbled upon a criminal enterprise that had operated with impunity in the shadow of Rio's most famous landmark. His final photographs would prove to be his most important, capturing evidence that would finally bring closure to his family and justice to those responsible for his death. The discovery of Jason Parker's remains transformed a decades-old cold case into one of Rio de Janeiro's most urgent active investigations. Within hours of the forensic team's findings, DEA agent Michael Torres landed in Rio, bringing with him 20 years of experience in cartel operations and a personal connection to the case he had first encountered as a junior agent. The joint task force assembled in a converted warehouse near the port of Rio, its walls soon covered with photographs, timelines, and connection maps. Captain Ana Santos, postponing her retirement indefinitely, led the Brazilian contingent, her intimate knowledge of the original investigation proving invaluable as new evidence emerged. The breakthrough came through modern technology applied to old evidence. Forensic imaging specialists, using techniques unavailable in 1998, enhanced the recovered photos from Jason's camera. The images revealed more than just a teenager's tourist snapshots. They documented an elaborate drug processing operation hidden in plain sight of Rio's most visited landmark. The task force identified a pattern that had eluded investigators for decades. Between 1995 and 2015, 37 tourists had disappeared from Rio's major attractions. While previously treated as separate incidents, they now showed striking similarities. Many victims had been last seen with unofficial guides, and most disappearances occurred during peak tourist seasons when crowds made surveillance difficult. Agent Torres recognized the sophistication of the operation. The cartel had exploited Rio's booming tourism industry, using legitimate-looking guides to identify vulnerable targets. The fake credentials were expertly forged, allowing the operatives to move freely through secured areas without arousing suspicion. The man in Jason's photographs, now identified as Roberto Silva, appeared in the backgrounds of other tourists' photos from different years. He had aged, changed his appearance slightly, but facial recognition software confirmed it was the same individual. Silva had worked the same territory for over a decade, perfecting his technique of isolating tourists under the guise of offering exclusive photo opportunities. Dr. Patricia Lima's forensic team made another crucial discovery. Soil samples from Jason's remains contained chemical traces matching those found at other suspected cartel disposal sites across South America. The signature was distinctive, a unique combination of processing agents used by only one major drug operation. The investigation revealed how Silva and his associates had exploited the complex topography of Tijuca Forest. The network of trails, many dating back to the colonial era, provided perfect coverage for moving both victims and drug shipments. The seemingly random locations of disappeared tourists actually formed a pattern, marking the boundaries of the cartel's territory. Captain Santos coordinated with tourism authorities to compile decades of guide registrations, identifying gaps that corresponded with known cartel activities. The fake guides had moved between official tour companies, always staying just long enough to establish credibility before disappearing with their victims. The task force's linguistic analysts studied Silva's pattern of approach, documented in witness statements spanning 20 years. He had developed a sophisticated method of selecting victims, targeting those who showed interest in photography or hiking, offering them access to secret viewpoints that would appeal to their specific interests. As evidence mounted, the investigation expanded beyond Rio. Similar disappearances at tourist sites in Sao Paulo, Salvador, and other Brazilian cities suggested a nationwide operation. The cartel had created a brutal but efficient system, using tourist kidnappings both for ransom and to eliminate potential witnesses to their drug operations. The recovered camera became the centerpiece of the investigation. Jason's final photos provided not just evidence of the crime, but a detailed layout of the cartel's processing facility. The teenager had unknowingly documented crucial operational details, storage methods, laboratory setup, and most importantly, the faces of several key operatives. The task force worked around the clock, knowing they were racing against time. Every day brought new connections as they unraveled 2 decades of criminal activity. The pattern that emerged was both sophisticated and chilling, a criminal enterprise that had turned Rio's natural beauty into a hunting ground, with Silva as its most efficient predator. The investigation revealed how close authorities had come to discovering the truth years earlier. Previous searches had passed within meters of the processing facility, but the cartel's careful site selection and the dense forest canopy had kept their operation hidden. Now, with Jason's photographs providing a literal snapshot of their operation, the full scope of their crimes began to emerge from the shadows of Tijuca Forest. The breakthrough in the Parker case came with devastating swiftness in April 2018. After 20 years of dead ends, Roberto Silva's face emerged from the enhanced photographs recovered from Jason's camera, a ghost from the past finally given form through modern technology. The man who had haunted security footage for 2 decades now had a name, a history, and most importantly, a traceable pattern of movement through Rio's criminal underworld. Silva's identification sent shockwaves through the investigation team. At 49, he had risen through the ranks of the cartel, evolving from a simple tour guide imposter to a key figure in their kidnapping operations. His expertise in selecting victims had made him invaluable to the organization, allowing him to operate with impunity at Rio's most visible tourist sites. Records revealed Silva's methodical approach. He had worked briefly for legitimate tour companies, learning their protocols and copying their procedures. His English was impeccable, honed through years of living in Miami during his youth. This linguistic ability made him particularly effective with American tourists, able to put them at ease with familiar cultural references and shared experiences. The investigation team discovered Silva's signature method through witness statements spanning 2 decades. He would approach tourists who showed serious interest in photography, offering them access to secret viewpoints that promised unique angles of Christ the Redeemer. The offer was tailored to appeal to photography enthusiasts, making Jason Parker a perfect target. Silva's movements through Rio's tourism industry painted a picture of calculated precision. He never stayed in one area too long, rotating between major attractions to avoid detection. The cartel had provided him with expertly forged credentials, allowing him to blend seamlessly into the legitimate tourism workforce. When tourists disappeared, he would simply shift to another location, leaving no trail for investigators to follow. The recovered photos from Jason's camera revealed more than just Silva's identity. They documented a sophisticated drug processing operation hidden in the forest, complete with industrial equipment and storage facilities. Jason had unknowingly captured crucial evidence of the cartel's operations in his final moments, including faces of key personnel and details of their processing methods. As investigators pieced together Silva's history, connections to other disappearances emerged. Between 1995 and 2015, he had been linked to at least 27 missing tourists, though authorities suspected the actual number was higher. Each case followed a similar pattern. Tourists separated from their groups, led away with promises of spectacular never to be seen again. The breakthrough led investigators to Silva's current operation in Salvador, where he had relocated after Jason's disappearance. Surveillance teams observed him using the same techniques, now targeting tourists at historic churches. His confidence had grown over the years, but his basic methodology remained unchanged, a testament to its brutal effectiveness. The final piece fell into place when forensic analysis matched soil samples from Jason's remains to other suspected cartel disposal sites. The unique chemical signature confirmed what investigators had long suspected. The tourist disappearances were part of a larger criminal enterprise, with Silva serving as its most effective operative. On May 15, 2018, exactly 1 month after his identification, Roberto Silva was arrested as he approached a group of tourists outside Salvador's São Francisco church. He offered no resistance, maintaining the same calm demeanor that had made him such an effective predator. In his possession were forged tour guide credentials and a camera containing photos of potential targets. During interrogation, Silva's facade finally cracked. Faced with Jason's photographs and forensic evidence spanning 2 decades, he began to reveal the inner workings of the cartel's operation. His testimony would ultimately lead to the identification of 38 additional victims and the arrest of 12 cartel members. The breakthrough brought both justice and closure to the Parker family. Sarah Parker, upon viewing Silva's booking photo, recognized him immediately as the guide who had approached her son that July morning in 1998. The man who had haunted their nightmares for 20 years now had a face, a name, and most importantly, a cell waiting for him in Brazil's highest security prison. The trial of Roberto Silva began in September 2018, drawing international media attention to Rio de Janeiro's federal court. The man who had haunted the Parker family's nightmares for 20 years sat impassively in the defendant's box, his carefully maintained facade of normality finally stripped away by the weight of evidence against him. The prosecution presented a devastating case, built on Jason Parker's recovered photographs and 2 decades of meticulously gathered evidence. Witness after witness took the stand, including families of other victims, each testimony adding to the portrait of a predator who had turned Rio's most beloved landmarks into hunting grounds. Sarah Parker's testimony proved particularly powerful. Speaking in a clear, unwavering voice, she described her last moments with Jason, the long years of searching, and the final, brutal confirmation of her worst fears. The courtroom fell silent as she addressed Silva directly, asking him why he had chosen her son. Silva, for the first time, showed emotion, lowering his head as she spoke. The evidence from Jason's camera formed the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. The recovered images not only documented Silva's crimes, but exposed the broader operations of a cartel that had terrorized Rio's tourist industry for over 15 years. Forensic experts detailed how Jason's final photographs had provided the key to unraveling a criminal enterprise that had claimed dozens of victims. Silva's conviction in November 2018 marked more than just the end of a single case. The judge's sentence, life imprisonment without possibility of parole, acknowledged the broader impact of his crimes. The ruling set a precedent for cases involving organized crime targeting tourists, leading to stricter penalties and enhanced international cooperation in similar investigations. The case's resolution triggered sweeping changes in Brazil's tourism industry. New regulations required tour guides to undergo extensive background checks and carry digitally verified credentials. Tourist sites implemented advanced security systems, and international police cooperation led to the creation of a rapid response protocol for missing tourists. For the Parker family, the conviction brought a measure of peace, but could never erase their loss. They established the Jason Parker Foundation, working with Brazilian authorities to improve tourist safety and support families of missing persons. The foundation's first initiative funded enhanced security cameras at Christ the Redeemer, ensuring that no other family would experience their decades of uncertainty. Captain Ana Santos, who had kept her prom, to never abandon the case, attended Jason's memorial service in Miami. The photograph of Jason at Christ the Redeemer, recovered from his camera, now hangs in her office at the Rio Military Police Headquarters, a reminder of the case that changed how Brazil protects its visitors. The impact of Silva's arrest extended far beyond a single conviction. His testimony led investigators to other cartel operations throughout South America, resulting in the dismantling of multiple criminal networks. The case became a model for international law enforcement cooperation, studied by police academies across the Americas. 2 years after Silva's conviction, the site where Jason's remains were found was transformed into a memorial garden, maintained by the Brazilian Park Service. A small plaque bears his name and a simple message in Portuguese and English, in memory of those lost, that others might be found. The garden serves as both a reminder of past tragedies and a symbol of Brazil's commitment to preventing future ones. The Parker case fundamentally altered how missing persons cases are handled in Brazil. Law enforcement agencies established new protocols for coordinating with international authorities, while tourism officials implemented strict monitoring systems for guide certifications. The changes came too late for Jason, but his story ensured that future visitors would find a safer Rio de Janeiro. Sarah Parker made one final trip to Christ the Redeemer in 2020, carrying Jason's recovered camera. Standing where her son had last been seen, she took a photograph of the statue at sunrise, completing the image he never had the chance to capture. The photograph now hangs in the visitor center, alongside information about tourist safety and a reminder that vigilance is the price of security in even the most beautiful places.